Okay, so I think because of the online students, I have to remain seated most of the time, but I'll try to, because it's not very comfortable to teach by sitting, so I'll try to, combine both aspects, right? So can you quickly tell me what Miss Timmy covered last week for y'all in the first session? Quick recall of what you have done so far before we start off today. What did you learn? What did she start off with? So I think it was general introduction to economics. So what were the concepts she discussed? Yeah, so she must have told you the difference between microeconomics and macroeconomics, right? What else? Okay, what is positive economics? What are normative economics? She must have. Okay, what else? Sorry? I answered. And you were answered. Those who are people? Okay, production possibility curve. She has taught. Okay, what else? You have the slide with you, all right? Okay, you can look at it and tell me if you can't remember. Excellent. So how many students are there in this class? Roughly? 30. So what else? What did she discuss? Demand. Demand and supply also. Right? Only demand curve or supply curve also. Only demand. Okay. What did she talk to you on the demand? Movement along the demand curve and it shifts into demand. Okay. What else? That's all. And that's why we all start from. So today we'll be discussing about elasticity concepts and its applications, right? So this is also related to the concept of demand and supply. I have uploaded these slides in your LMS. You might have seen. So these are the learning outcomes of your lesson, right? So these are stated even in your course outline. You might have access to your course outline. So every topic what we will discuss will have a specific set of learning outcomes. So what is the general meaning of learning outcomes? What do you mean by learning outcomes?
We can maybe also to explain.
Exactly. So learning outcomes are very important because at the end of the lesson, you should be able to do all of these things. Now, for example, you should be able to describe the importance of elasticity concepts. You should be able to identify the different types of elasticity. These are the outcomes of the lesson. So once you complete the lesson, you should be able to demonstrate these skills, right? So it's a good measurement for you as well as for us. So by the end of the lesson, we can evaluate whether I have taught you all these learning outcomes. You can evaluate yourself whether you have learned all of these learning outcomes, right? And this is very important even for your examination. Because at the exam, what we will test you are these learning outcomes. We will see whether you can describe the importance of elasticity, whether you can demonstrate the relationship between elasticity and total revenue. So we will check those things, whether you can do it or not at the examination. So for evaluation, also these learning outcomes are very important, right? So make sure you always constantly look at learning outcomes and evaluate yourself. can I do this? You cannot do, you have to work on it. You can always ask me, get help, guidance, and work on yourself, right? Yes, so these are the learning outcomes of your lesson. Can you quickly read them through silently? Okay. So have you heard this word elasticity before? I heard that you all are exempted students. From what did you all get exempted? Sorry? Chartered. So you all have completed chartered or no? Sorry? Stage. Which stage? What are the stages of chartered? Sorry, I'm not aware because I'm a SEMA accountant. I don't know what are the stages in chartered. There are 3 stages. Okay. Business corporate strategy. So which level have you got exempted? Business level. So in first level, you all have completed. So you all have done economics there. Yes. As a subject, you all have done economics. So I'm sure these will be peanuts for you all, right? So what is the concept of elasticity? What do you mean by that? Have you heard that word? You all have done economics, right? Okay, so what is elasticity? Have you heard? Please raise your hand, those who have heard the word elasticity before. Up, I cannot see. Heard the word elasticity. Okay, so what is the meaning of the word elasticity? Just a simple guess at least. Sorry? Stretching. Stretching, yes, good, very good to start off with. What else? One day changes to a change in another. Very good. So that is the basic definition of elasticity, right? So as you correctly said, elasticity means simple to it derives out of the word elastic, right? So elastic we know when we put pressure on one side, on the other side it moves, right? So elasticity simply means it's actually how one variable responds to a change in another variable, right? So it can be anything. Now, for example, let's say if there's rain, how would we respond to that? So rain will be an independent variable. There's no controlling impact. Nobody can control rain, so it's very independent. But based on rain, how we react will be different. So we are depending on rain, right? So that there is a response we make towards any natural changes, right? So that is also an elasticity. It also explains the elasticity concept. So elastic means if one variable changes, if another variable react to it, then that is called elasticity, right? So elasticity is used to measure the response in one variable when another variable changes, right? So in simple terms, elasticity is used to measure responsiveness. How would you respond to something? Okay. So this is a simple formula of elasticity in general. If you want to calculate elasticity of anything, this is the formula which you would use, right? Elasticity of A with respect to B will be, so we take the percentage change in A over percentage change in B. So what this means is, if the variable A changes in response to changes in variable B, the elasticity of A with respect to B is equal to the percentage change in A divided by the percentage change in B. right? So here, can you identify what is the independent variable and what is the dependent variable? What is the independent variable? Sorry? B. B is the independent variable. B is the one which is changing. And because of the change in B, A is responding. A is also changing because of the change in B. So A will be the dependent variable. B is the independent variable. So always you can see in this formula, B should come to the down and A should go to the up, right? Because A depends on the change of B, right? So that is a simple formula which can be used to measure elasticity. Okay. So if there's anything which I speak which is not there on the slides, please write them down in your notes. Okay. So why is elasticity important? Importance of elasticity concept. Now, as I earlier said, elasticity, the main use of elasticity is to measure responsiveness, right? Now, when it comes to economics, what we are trying to do is using these elasticity concepts, what we're trying to see is responsiveness of consumers and suppliers, or rather sellers, right? We try to look at, now this is business economics, so we are trying to look at how consumers and sellers respond to different variables, right? So when we talk about responsiveness of consumers, consumers like are people like you and me. So we respond to different variables, right? So when you're going to purchase a product, for example, your decision of purchase will depend on many factors, right? Can you tell me some factors which you would consider when you're going to buy a product? Now, let's say, for example, now this is the season, so you go on shopping to buy clothes, right? So, what are the factors you would generally consider when you go shopping, clothing shopping? Price. Okay, tell me one. Price. So everybody says price. You of course think about the price, especially in the current scenario with the economic crisis and everything. You will definitely think about the price and the cost. How much can you spend on clothing, right? So price is definitely a component. What else? Quality. So you would look at the quality. Like, is this, does this look good? And how long can you use it? Is it durable? The quality is another concern. What else? Design, of course, right? When it comes to clothing, fashion industry, you definitely look at the design, right? Because there are trending designs, old design, new design. So you look at the design. What else? Yeah, what occasion you're going to wear this, right? Is it for office wear, or is it going to be like casual wear, or is it party wear? So based on the occasion. What else? Age, yes. So you look at the age aspect as well. Does it suit to my age, right? So likewise, you look at multiple factors, multiple aspects when you're making a decision. So consumers are responding to multiple aspects before they make a purchase decision. Is that clear? So you can write those examples under this point if you want. So consumers make multiple, they take multiple factors into consideration before they make a purchase decision. So their responsiveness depend on the factors you said, the price, quality, design, and then you said occasion, right? Age. So based on all of that only, you will make your clothing decisions. Students are joining through the team. Do you understand? Do you have any questions? If so, you can unmute yourself and always ask quickly. Okay, now we are going to look at the responsiveness of suppliers. Suppliers, in other words, producers who produce that particular good or service and supply to the market, right? So, what are the factors suppliers? So, can you now, you're assume that you're not a consumer, but you're a supplier. You're a businessman or businesswoman who produce goods and services and supply to the market. So, what factors do you think they will consider when they are making the production decisions or supply decisions? What are the things which would affect them? For what factors would they respond? Sorry? Availability. Oh, availability of what? Resources. Yes. So you would think about availability of resources when you're producing or selling something. Do I have the required raw material or any other machinery or equipments required to engage in the production of this product? So based on that, your production decision would vary. Do I have the required inputs for this production process, right? So that is one factor. What else? Sorry? Planning. Can you explain it a little? What do you mean by planning? Production plan. Okay, so what is your production plan? Yeah, your production plan also you would consider when you're making a production decision. Okay, what else? Price. Price of what? Okay. Price of the product. Yeah, so that is also an important factor. Why? Because price is what will generate you the revenue. So for a product you sell, how much can you charge from the consumer? Is it an attractive price? Can I make good profits out of that price? So that is also sort of a motivator for you to produce and sell something, right? If a particular product, if you cannot sell it for a good price, naturally a producer will not be motivated to produce and sell it, right? So that is definitely a good factor. What else? Quantity is what you are producing and selling. No? Demand, like whether the consumers are willing to buy the product. Yeah, that also you would consider whether the consumers have a preference towards my product, right? What else? Cost of raw material, yes. So one thing you look at the availability of the raw material, second thing you look at the cost of the raw material. Can you afford that cost? Can you afford that raw material? And after including that raw material or the particular ingredient, can you price it at a reasonable price? Can you make profits? Right? So you look at all those components. So those are the things which suppliers respond to. So suppliers get affected if cost of raw material increases. If there's no raw material available, so based on that, they respond differently, right? So those are the factors which suppliers respond when they're making their supply decisions, right? So can you take down those examples? Okay. Okay, so accordingly, now these are the importance of elasticity concepts, and accordingly, we would be able to learn different elasticities which comes in economics, which is relevant to consumers as well as suppliers. So we will go to learn them, right? Before going to elasticity, I just wanted to recall you about the demand curve. So you all have learned about demand as you said in the first session, right? So this is a typical demand curve, and you can see its demand curve is downward sloping, right? So you said you learned about demand last week. Can somebody tell me why the demand curve is downward sloping?
Prices go up, the quantity will lower.
Price go up?
Quantity will be on lower side.
Okay. So when price of a product increase, demand for a good will decrease, right? There's a negative relationship between price and the quantity demand. Okay. So that is regulated by this concept called ceteris paribus. Have you heard of this word before? So this is the theory which underlying that. So what it says is when price rise, quantity demand can be expected to decline, right? And the vice versa. When the price fall, the quantity demand will increase. That's a natural behavior, right? If a price of a product increase, we naturally don't like to purchase it. So we will reduce the quantity demand. But when the price of a product decline, we like to buy more of that product. That's a natural scenario, right? So there's a negative relationship between price and quantity demand, and that is why the demand curve has a negative or a downward sloping curve. Okay, so you have covered it earlier. And now we will go on to discuss about the price elasticity of demand, right? So here we are looking at basically the relationship between price and the quantity demand, right? How much quantity demand is elastic to a change in price, okay? So here the independent variable is price. Upon a change of price, who is responding? Quantity demand. Demand is responding. So demand is your dependent variable, right? Now we know when it comes to price as a concept, as a variable, price is something you can anyway measure, right? Because price is always in terms of numerical value, rupees or dollars or whatever. It will be in numerical values. It's something which you can measure. Demand, can you measure? Demand as a concept we cannot measure. We cannot say how much demand is there because demand is some urge or a willingness or a desire to buy. So you cannot really measure the concept of demand, right? Even though this word read as price elasticity of demand, price can be measured, but demand cannot be measured, right? So if you are going to, check the responsiveness of one variable to another, both variables should be able to be measured. That's why even though this term suggests price elasticity of demand, we actually price can be measured, but since demand cannot be measured, we replace this demand by the word quantity demand, right? We quantify the demand. Otherwise, demand cannot be measurable. So we quantify it, we identify the quantity of demand. How much of quantity do you want? So there, when a quantity comes, we can measure it, right? So that's why in the formula, it looks like quantity demand. In case if you get confused by the two words I mentioned, right? So price elasticity of demand in simple terms, like in abbreviation, we call it PED. So that's a abbreviation you can use, right? PED is the ratio of the percentage of change in quantity demanded to the percentage change in price, right? So this is the formula which you can use to calculate price elasticity of demand. Okay, so this is similar to the original formula of measuring elasticity. Percentage change in price. So this is the independent variable. How when price change by a certain percentage, how much the quantity demand will change in what percentage. So that is your dependent variable. So you can calculate using this formula, right? Now when you look at this formula, right, percentage change in price can be a positive change or a negative change. In the sense, price can either increase or decrease, right? So let's assume price increases. If so, quantity demand, what is the percentage? How will that respond if the price increases? Negative, it will decrease, right? So in this formula, you will see in this change in price, if there's a plus sign, your quantity demand change percentage will carry a negative sign. So negative value divided by a positive value, what will be the answer? Negative. Mathematics, you learn that, right? So it's a negative answer. So always price elasticity of demand, when you calculate it, it will always have a negative sign. Remember that, okay? Even when you're doing calculations, when you're doing questions, don't ever forget to put the negative sign in the PED value. The final PED value you generate will be a negative percentage. The reason for that is the negative relationship between price and quantity demand, right? So that's what explains here. Can you quickly read this paragraph? Read it slowly to yourself. Okay, Dan, did you understand that? Is that clear? Okay. Now that is about PED, price elasticity of demand. Keep that in your mind. Okay, we will come to it later. Now we are going to look at different types of elasticities available. Okay. Have you learned about these types of elasticities before? Have learned it. Okay. So can somebody explain me what you mean by perfectly inelastic demand? What is meant by perfectly inelastic demand?
Even though the price changes, the quantity is same.
Quantity demand will remain same. So there are basically two extremes for PED, right? Price elasticity of demand can be zero. That is one extreme. It can be zero, or it could go to infinity. But this infinity will carry the negative mark, right? Sorry, it's not mentioned here. Infinity, it will be negative because there's a negative relationship between price and quantity demand, right? So the two extremes, zero and the infinity, right? So PED value either can be zero or infinity or anything in between that, right? So these are the two extremes of elasticities you will face. One is where the PED value will be zero, and the other one is elasticity. PED value will be infinite, right? So PED 0 means demand in which quantity demanded does not respond at all to a change in price. However much the price changes, quantity demand is fixed. It will never respond, right? So that is why here, this is a demand curve, but in terms of quantity demand, it's fixed. The price could go anything above, but quantity demand will never change. It will be always fixed, right? So it's a vertical line parallel to the price axis, right? It's fixed. So this is called perfectly inelastic demand. It's not elastic. It's completely inelastic. That is perfectly inelastic demand. Clear? Then the other extreme is perfectly elastic demand. Demand in which quantity drops to zero at the slightest increase in price. So perfectly elastic demand is that demand cannot tolerate any price change, right? So even for a small, slightest price increase, the demand could drop to zero. So demand can be at this level or somewhere here. But if your price changes, increases even slightly by a slight cent, your demand could quickly drop to zero, right? So it's a horizontal line parallel to the quantity axis, right? It could go to infinity. That's why it says infinity. It could go to infinity, or it could come to zero. Is that clear? Right? So that is the perfectly elastic demand. Any questions on that? Do you have any questions? So can you tell me some examples for perfectly inelastic demand? What sort of products could be such inelastic in terms of demand that you don't consider the price of it at all? Medicines, right? Good. So as an example shown here, insulin, right? Insulin is an essential medicine for diabetic patients, right? So however much the price increases, would you stop consuming insulin if you're on insulin? You will not, because you can't live. You can't survive without it if you're at a particular stage of diabetic, right? You have to take that medicine. So even though there's price increase or decrease, you won't change the requirement. You will need the daily requirement. So for such medicine, like essential medicine, not like things like Panadol or anything, but essential medicine like life related medicine, you will face the inelastic demand, right? And for what sort of products could there be a elastic demand? What sort of products could have an elastic demand? Sorry?
Consumer.
Yeah, consumer goods. Not all consumer goods, but type of consumer goods. No.
Just for so many alternatives.
Yeah, so many alternatives, but usually, if you will face the elastic demand for products which are identical in nature or homogeneous. Now, a good example we can take in Sri Lanka is rice. If you take rice, rice is mostly homogeneous or identical. You can't separate rices based on the producer. Right? Or Nipuna Sahal Ararya Sahal, whatever the type of rice you have, two types, even though two manufacturers will pack it and sell it to you, you can't really clearly identify a difference between whose rice is this and whose rice is that. So that's a identical or a homogeneous product. So here the example they have taken is wheat flour. Wheat flour is also like that. You cannot really segregate it. Those are homogeneous products. Usually we call them commodity products, which are sold in commodity market. You buy them in bulk, and then different suppliers can be there who separate them, pack it and put their brand and sell. But those products are identical, right? So the identical or homogeneous products, let's say one seller increase the price slightly, right? But there are so many other sellers who sell the same product at a lower price. So would you buy from the highest priced seller? No, because the same wheat flour, same rice, or take an example, sugar. Again, sugar is identical, right? So if you are buying, let's say, white sugar of one seller and the white sugar of the other seller, there's no difference. So if that other shop is selling at a higher price, you won't pay that premium. You will buy it from the lower place, right? Because there's no really difference in terms of the quality or in terms of the product, right? So for such identical or homogeneous products, uh, demand will be elastic. So if one seller increase the price at least by 1 rupee, you won't buy from them. You buy from the lowest price one. All right? Because there's no really difference in the product. So such product face a perfectly elastic demand. Is that clear? Is that clear? Are you clear about the example, the ones who are back? Okay. So in the sellers who are selling products in a perfectly inelastic demand market, right? They cannot ever increase price other than other sellers. Now, even if you take eggs market, it's the same scenario, right? If there's a market price, you have to sell it at the market price, right? If you increase your price at least by 1 or 5 rupees, your consumer will not buy from you because buying egg from you versus the other person is different. So you will go to the market price. So any seller who operating in that market, they have to adopt the market price. They can't change price as they want. Now for biscuits, it's not the scenario. Maliban biscuit, Munch biscuit, and different varieties are there. Chocolate, ginger, different varieties are there. You can charge any price you like. But for things like sugar, wheat flour, rice, you have to go ahead with the market price. No seller can sell it above the market price. If you sell it above, nobody will buy from you. Because there are so many number of sellers out there who sell it at the market price. So consumers will go to them. Is that clear? So that situation, you will face a perfectly elastic demand. Is that clear? Any questions? Okay. So these are the two main types of extremes of elasticity. So I said there can be anything in between as well, right? So the other types of elasticities which are in between are called these, right? One is elastic demand, the other one is inelastic demand. Third one is unitary elastic demand, right? Elastic demand. Can you quickly read this? A demand relationship in which the percentage change in quantity demanded is larger than the percentage change in price in absolute value, right? A demand elasticity with an absolute value greater than -1, right? Elastic demand is your demand is not perfectly elastic, but it's elastic. Elastic means its quantity demand is little more responsive to a small change in price. So for a small change in price, the change in quantity will be larger. So if you look at this formula, for a small change in price, quantity demanded will change largely. Okay. For example, let's say your price changed by 5 rupees. But your quantity demand could reduce, let's say, by 1,000 units. For 5 rupee change, 1,000 unit drop. So that means quantity demand has responded so much even for a slight change in price. Okay? That means it's elastic. That is called elastic demand. Is that clear? So always when you calculate PED for elastic demand curve, the value will be, the PED value will be higher than 1, more than 1. Is that clear? So it will be greater than -1. Okay. On the other side, inelastic demand. Inelastic demand means it's not perfectly inelastic, but inelastic in the sense if your price changed by 1 unit, your demand drops, but by a very small percentage. Right? Let's say your price increased by 5 rupees, but quantity demand drops by only 10 units. If you look at the percentage change, for a large percentage change in price, percentage change in quantity demand is very smaller, so it's not very responsive. So that is why you call it inelastic. It responds, but not that much. Inelastic, right? So that value will be between 0 to -1. So the PED value when you calculate, it will be 0 point something, less than 1. Is that clear? So that is inelastic demand. Read this sentence. Okay. The third type of elasticity is unitary elastic demand. So unitary elastic means your price changed by a certain percentage. In a similar percentage, quantity demand drops. Now, for example, if price increased by 10%, your quantity demand also drops by 10%, equal. Denominator and the numerator equal. Then the final value you get for the PED calculation will be how much? 1. PED value will be equal to 1. Right? So that is called unitary elastic demand. Is that clear? So now let's look at the curves. These are the curves. Elastic demand means very elastic. Even for a small drop in or increase in price, quantity demand respond largely. Now, this axis you can see its price in dollars per pack. This is quantity demanded, right? Here the examples they have taken is potato chips, right? So even for a small change in price, now let's say the price change from this to this, it's a very small slight change, but quantity demand changed largely. Right here the price is 4.4, let's assume this is 4.5. So even for a small 1% increment, here you can see quantity demand decrease from 40 to 20. So even for a slight change in price, quantity demand respond largely. So elastic. So your curve, you can see a very flatter curve. Right? Flatter curve. Elastic demand will have a flatter curve. Then comes the inelastic demand, right? Inelastic demand will have a very steeper curve, right? It's closer to that vertical demand curve which you saw earlier, right? So here, for a certain change in price, how the content demand respond is very slightly. So here you can see the price increase from 3.2 to 3.3. But if you look at this, the change in quantity demand is very smaller, right? So that is very inelastic demand curve. So for what sort of products do you find inelastic demand? Sorry?
Rice.
Rice. You mean rice? Rice, we have a perfectly elastic demand. Earlier we looked at this perfectly elastic demand is for rice. This inelastic demand for what? Fuel. Somebody said fuel, right? Yeah, fuel or crude oil. Why? Why do you have an inelastic demand for fuel or crude oil? Sorry? Yes, one thing it's an essential good. Even though, let's say, tomorrow the government or whoever decides to increase the price, can you stop buying fuel? You can't, because to have the transport to move from one place to another, you need to buy it. So somehow, even though the price has increased, you will pump fuel to your vehicle, right? So, but there is a small decline in the sense, now you experienced that in the recent past, right? When the prices of fuel increases, you made small adjustments to your lifestyle. Probably where you used to go, you might have always used to drive your vehicle, but then wherever you can walk or wherever you can go by another mode of transport, you would have used. So you might have shifted to buses, trains, or walking or cycling. People might have done small shifts, and the quantity of fuel you use might also, you might have reduced slightly, like cutting down on trips and other stuff, and maybe you're using the vehicle only for essential things. So you have slightly adjusted your behavior, you have slightly decreased your demand, but not that much, right? You still try to manage your transportation, right? So why? Because it's an essential product. You cannot, just because the price increase, you cannot reduce the demand so much because you need it. There's no alternative for it. That's the other reason. One is it's essential. Second one, there's no substitute available. Just because crude oil price increase, can you pump coconut oil to your vehicle? No, there's no substitute available, right? You don't have any other alternatives to which you can move to. So that's why there is an inelastic demand. Is that clear? One thing it's essential, second thing, no substitutes. So you can write them down for what sort of product inelastic demand is. Mostly for essential items and for the products where there are no close substitutes. So gas also the similar scenario. Gas cylinders, even though the price increase, you can't immediately stop buying it. You will not immediately respond. Slowly you will find alternatives, thoroughly further everything, and you might move slowly. But that takes time, right? You can't immediately respond. So for such product, there's an inelastic demand. What sort of products you have elastic demand? Examples, elastic demand. Now the example here, they have given potato chips. It's not essential, right? It's not essential. You can live without potato chips, right? Even if the potato chips prices skyrocket, you can still survive without it. So you will respond, we are not going to buy it anymore. You can drop it off out of your consumption. What sort of such products are there? Biscuits, yeah. So you saw that recently, right? Like in the recent past, all of a sudden biscuit prices increased. So people quickly stopped purchasing biscuit. That is because it's elastic demand. They can do that because you can live without biscuits, no? So people drop the demand quickly because it's not worthy to pay that price and buy it. What else? Makeups, not very essential. So you can drop those consumption for the products which there is elastic demand. Anything else you can think of? And also the products which have more substitutes, right? So let's say price of some product increases largely. If you have close substitutes to it, you can stop purchasing that, right? Instead of that, you can purchase something else. So now, some time ago, if you look at the milk powder had an inelastic demand. But now it's quite elastic because people have now got used to live without milk powder, right? They have other substitutes. You can use fresh milk, or you can use, the collagen. Yeah, so there are other alternatives for you, right? To have as a morning drink. Or else now there's this kirite or something, like everything included in one packet, and Nesta malt, Milo, so all of those are alternatives for milk powder. No? So you have so many alternatives available. You necessarily don't have to depend on milk powder. So in that case, it will have elastic demand, right? Good if you're having collagen instead of milk tea. So that is examples for elastic demand. And unitary elastic demand, as I earlier said, it's about if price increased by certain percentage, the quantity demand decreased by the similar percentage, right? So I cannot give examples like that. I mean, if your PED calculation comes to 1, exact -1, then that product will have a unitary elastic demand curve. There's no such specific product which has unitary elastic demand. It depends on the calculation. Is that clear? Okay. So here they have just taken digital camera prices, but it differs how much the price change, the percentage, and how much quantity demand change. It's not relevant to the type or the nature of the product. It depends on the calculation. Okay. Is that clear? Now let's see how to calculate price elasticity of demand. Okay. So if you can recall the price elasticity of demand, basic formula is this. Percentage change in quantity demand divided by percentage change in price, right? That's a basic formula. So as per this formula, you can see there are two parts. One is this, the other one is this, right? So you have to calculate this separately and calculate this part separately. Then bring those two values here and calculate the final price elasticity of demand. So those are the steps of calculating price elasticity of demand. Okay. Now here I've taken an example. Now this is from your reference book, right? So price axis, quantity axis, there's a demand curve. So here the product they have taken is steak. So here the pounds of steak per month is mentioned here, price per pound of steak. So it's in dollars, right? So you can see earlier your demand price and quantity has been this, right? Your price has been 2 and the quantity demand has been 10. And the price has increased from 2 to 1. Sorry, the other way around. Initially, the price has been P1 has been 3 and Q1 initial quantity has been 5, right? So your price has dropped rather. Price per pound has dropped to P2, scenario 2, right? From $3 to $2. Because there's a price drop, the quantity demand has increased from 5 to 10, right? So this value now you have to put here. These are the steps. First step is you have to calculate the percentage change in quantity demand. How do you calculate that? First, you take the change in quantity demanded, right? What is the change in quantity demand means? Q2 minus Q1. That is how much? 10 minus 5. That is your this part. Then divided by Q1. Initial quantity. Always you divide by initial quantity. That's how you calculate a percentage of final quantity divided by initial. So final quantity minus initial quantity divided by the initial quantity. The initial quantity is 5. That now you have to convert it to percentage. So you multiply by 100%. Right? So 10 minus 5 is 5. 5 divided by 5 into 100% is 100%. Okay, so your percentage change in quantity demand final value comes to 100%. That is step 1. Then step 2, you calculate percentage change in price, similar to the previous scenario. Second price minus first price divided by price once, right? So 2 minus 3 divided by 3 into 100%. So the final value comes to minus 33.3%, right? So now you have separately percentage change in quantity demand and percentage change in price. Now you can come and substitute those values to your PED formula. So when you substitute the values to the PED formula, plus 100 divided by minus 33.3. Remember, because there's a negative relationship between price and quantity demand. So your final value comes to minus 3. So PED value is minus 3. Now can you tell me by looking at this value, this product has the elastic demand or inelastic demand or unitary elastic?
Elastic.
Elastic. Why?
Greater than 1.
Greater than 1. Your PED value is greater than 1. So it's a elastic demand curve. So you can make a note of it. Later on, we'll try to do questions from PED calculations. Okay. Now we will look at determinants of demand elasticity. So what are the determinants or what are the, you need little more time? Okay. 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 So now we will look at determinants of demand elasticity. What are the factors which will determine the elasticity of certain goods, right? So earlier we said elasticity can be varied from 0 to infinity. It can be any value. What are the factors which will determine this? Why would certain products have elastic demand? Why would certain products have a inelastic demand? What are the factors which will determine that? Okay, so these are the factors. First one, availability of substitutes. Do you have substitutes for that particular product? If yes, if you have so many substitutes, then you don't have to cling on to that product and stay. You can always move out if that product price increases. So more substitutes, demand will be elastic. But if for a product you like, there are no much close substitutes, then even though the price slightly increase, you tend to cling on to it for a little while because you don't have other options to move to. So then demand will be inelastic, even there is less substitutes, right? So based on the factor availability of substitutes, demand can be elastic or inelastic. The other point is the importance of being unimportant. What do you mean by that? Can you read this sentence and see whether you understand it? When an item represents a relatively small part of our total budget, we tend to pay little attention to its price, right? The importance of being unimportant, in the sense, let's say for a particular product, you pay a very small percentage out of your total income, right? So it's quite negligible for you. Even the price slightly increase of that product, it's negligible to you. Can you tell some examples for such products? Out of your total income, you spend a very small percentage on that product.
Tender coconut.
Sorry?
Tender coconut. King coconut.
King coconut.
Oh, Highland.
Okay, king coconut, yes. Probably you're spending a very small percentage of your total income. So if the price increase or decrease, you will not really feel it, right? It's a very small percentage change. What else? Haircuts for men, probably, right? How much do you spend for a haircut? 100. 500. Oh my God, it has inflated, no? Usually boys' haircuts used to be 150, 200 in that range. Now it's 500. Okay. Yeah, but that must be very negligible for you. But what about the girls? How much is the haircut? Very expensive, right? So that doesn't apply for girls probably. For boys, yeah, you can get a haircut for a small cost. So you really don't care whether the price slightly increase or decrease, right? What else? So in Sri Lanka, now scenarios are very different. No, now everything really affects us. But yeah, as you say, so out of your total income, the percentage you allocate might be smaller. Or let's take like a small packet of mint or like toffees or something like that. You spend on a small pack of mints or toffee, something like that. It's a very small consumption, small purchase. Toffee price increased by 1 or 2 rupees, you really don't feel it, right? Because out of your total income or total spending, the amount you allocate to that is very small. Okay, so for such products, your because you are spending a very small part of your total budget, you really don't pay attention to its price changes. It's negligible. And as a result, your demand will be what? Elastic or inelastic? Inelastic. So even the seller increase the price by 1 rupee, you really don't decrease your demand. You don't even sometimes know the price has increased by 1 or 2 rupees. You really don't even know. So then anyway, you don't respond. So you will have an inelastic demand. So inelastic demand is beneficial for the seller or not? It's beneficial because if your consumer is not responding much to your price changes, you can change your prices as you want and increase your revenue, right? So such unimportant products usually have an inelastic demand curve, right? The other one is time dimension. What do you mean by that? Can you read this paragraph again and see whether you understand it? What does that mean? What does it mean? Can somebody tell me?
Long-term substitute products will be available in the market. The households can. So the example is gas. The recent past, when with the gas shortage, we didn't have substitute short.
Yeah.
But in the long term, we had
Yes.
the market.
Exactly. So some products you will have a very inelastic demand curve in the short term. Short term, the demand is inelastic because the supplier or seller increase the price. You can't quickly respond to that price increment. So you stay for a while. But with time, as he correctly said, in the longer term, if you feel this price is too high, you try to find substitutes and switch your behavior. You change your behavior. You find alternatives over a long period of time. Immediately, demand is inelastic. You can't respond, right? But over a time, even the inelastic demand can become an elastic demand. That's what it says. Short term, you will face the inelastic demand, but over long time horizon, long term, you will change that inelastic demand to elastic demand. So now, gas is one example. Other than that, crude oil is another example, right? So now, like about 20, 30 years ago, crude oil was affordable, right? And there were a lot of sale of cars, vehicles across the world. But because crude oil is a natural resource and it's deteriorating over time, so big countries who supply crude oil, they started increasing the prices slowly, right? So we were experiencing that increase in price in the last 2 decades, right? So now the entire world knows the crude oil price will increase further. It will never reduce, it will continuously increase. So countries and other car manufacturers are aware of it. So what they are trying to do is they try to find alternatives. So you can see now very quick adjustments which most of the automobile manufacturers did was they tried to improve the fuel efficiency in the vehicle by having more capacity, like the petrol tank can do more mileage in simple terms. So you try to manufacture vehicles like that were fuel efficient. And then the hybrid came into place where the fuel efficiency is very high. Then like electronic cars were introduced. So solar power cars are available in some parts of the world. So likewise, they try to find alternative energy sources because this energy is getting expensive. So over time, even though the usual demand curve for crude oil is inelastic, over time it's becoming elastic. Longer time horizon, if you look at, it has become elastic. So the time dimension is also a critical factor which will determine the demand elasticity. Is that clear? If you want, you can quickly write down those examples. Write down the examples. These are there in the slide, but the examples we discussed, you can write them down. For your exam, if you ask questions, it's good if you can always explain using examples, right? The students are joining online. Do you have any questions? Okay. Okay. So now let's move on to this concept, elasticity and total revenue. So this is one of the learning outcomes which we had. We learned about importance of elasticity and then different types of elasticity we discussed. Now we are going to look at the relationship between elasticity and total revenue, right? Now, total revenue to whom here? Now, elasticity and total revenue relationship. Through this elasticity concept, who earns the revenue? There are two parties which are discussing here, right? Consumers and suppliers, sellers. Who earns the revenue? Sellers or supplier is the one who's earning revenue. So now we are going to look at here how the elasticity of different types of elasticity, inelastic demand, elastic demand, how does it affect to the revenue generated by the supply, right? So total revenue, how do you calculate total revenue? Price of product multiplied by the quantity sold of that product. So total revenue you calculate like that, right? Effects of price change on quantity demand. Now we know there's negative relationship between price and quantity demand. When price increase, quantity demand decrease. When price decrease, quantity demand increase, right? Now let's look at different scenarios, different types of elasticities, right? Now, effective price increase on a product with inelastic demand. What do you mean by inelastic demand? Can you quickly recall? Price increase by small percentage. Sorry? Yeah. For a particular change in price, how the quantity demand response is smaller. That is what you mean by inelastic demand. So let's say price increased by a larger value, but here you can see the difference in the two arrows, right? Quantity demand decreased by a smaller value. Then what is the impact on total revenue? Total revenue increase. Why? You increase your price. You increase your price, let's say by 20%, but your quantity demand decreased by 10%. 20% increase price, 10% decrease in quantity demand. So the benefit of price increment is higher than the disadvantage of the quantity decrease, right? So therefore, overall, the Stella is at a beneficial place because your total revenue will increase due to the increase in price. Is that clear? Those are at the back, are you clear? Okay. So with regards to an inelastic demand curve, if you're selling a product which has the inelastic demand curve, it's always beneficial to increase price. Because when you increase price, quantity demand does not respond much. So your overall total revenue increases. Okay? But let's see an elastic demand. For a product which has the elastic demand, even for a slight increase in price, quantity demand drops largely. So it's not increasing the price is not that beneficial. Because when you try to increase the price, on the other hand, quantity demand drops largely. So it really affects your total revenue. You cannot really get that advantage of price increment, right? So price increase by small percentage, quantity demand drops by a larger percentage. As a result, your total revenue drops. Okay. So if you have a product which has elastic demand, it's not advisable to increase price. Is that clear? Effect on price cut on a product with elastic demand. The other side. Now this is about price increase. Now this is price cut. For a product with elastic demand, if you reduce the price slightly, right? How will quantity demand respond? Because it's elastic demand. Quantity demand responds largely. Consumers get so motivated and they buy more. So for a small percentage decline in price, let's say you decline price by 5%, your quantity demand can increase by 30%. So it's always beneficial if you want to increase your total revenue, drop the price slightly so that people will buy more and more. Your overall total revenue increases. If you want to make more revenue, if your product is facing elastic demand, rather than increasing the price, best thing is to decrease the price. So your demand will boost, and as a result, your total revenue will increase, right? So for a company who is having an elastic demand, now what is advisable is reduce the price. Okay. Effect of price cut on a product with inelastic demand. It's the other way around for an inelastic demand curve. If you drop the price, your quantity demand will increase, but slightly. So it's not beneficial. Dropping the price is not beneficial because quantity demand increase responds only in a small percentage. So your total revenue will not increase, it rather decreases. Is that clear? So that's how total revenue behave based on the behavior of the elasticity, so elastic, inelastic. Is that clear? Can you quickly just go through this and see when it's clear, or if you have any questions, ask me and clarify now itself. Clear? Okay. Any questions? Do you have any questions? Okay. Now let's move on to other important elasticities other than the price. Now, so far, what we have discussed so far is about price elasticity of demand, right? But there are other factors which are affecting demand now. So those factors are what we are going to discuss under other important elasticities. Okay. This is one of them. Income elasticity of demand, right? What is meant by income elasticity of demand? As suggested here, right? Measure of responsiveness of demand to changes in income. Now, we change our demand for changes in price. That's obvious. That's what we discussed so far. But also, we change our demand based on the income we earn. Based on our income, monthly income, annual income, based on that, what we buy, what we consume, our lifestyle, everything changes, right? So we respond to changes in income as well, our demand decisions. So that is what we check here, income elasticity of demand. So how do you calculate that? Percentage change in income over percentage change in quantity demand. So when your income changes by a certain percentage, how would your quantity demand will change? So usually income elasticity of demand, how will it be? Can it be positive or negative? Usually income elasticity of demand will be positive. If your income increases, you demand more. If your income decreases, you demand less. That's the usual scenario. But income elasticity of demand can have a negative value as well. Okay. During periods of rising income, people increase their spending on some goods, but reduce their spending on other goods. So for what sort of products will there be a positive income elasticity of demand? Now, what do you think about essential products, like what we consume on a daily basis, like food items, grocery, things like that? What sort of income elasticity of demand will it have? Inelastic. Why?
To change the according to the budget or
Yeah. Now, the essential stuff like your food items or your grocery items, do you spend too much on your grocery items because your income increases? Let's say now this is December. Okay, next year you are getting a salary increment. Okay, assume positive thinking, right? So you're getting a salary increment next year. So then what will happen? Would you spend that increased salary, increased money on grocery shopping? What do you like to do from that? If you get a salary increment next year, what would you generally do? What do you do? Will you buy more grocery? Ideally, no, but in Sri Lankan scenario, with inflation, grocery will consume that money. Sad situation is that. But you should assume that we are not in this crisis country. If so, if your income sort of increases, you don't spend that money on grocery. Like the usual, the essential day-to-day stuff, you don't spend on them, right? Where would you spend them on? Entertainment, these non-essential stuff, right? Or to buy a luxury product, right? So usually there's a positive income elasticity of demand for luxury products, right? So if your income increases, what you want to buy is anything luxury, which are not a necessity, right? So you probably buy a branded something, or you probably buy, I don't know, jewelry or like electronic items or something which is luxury, not really essential. So in that case, there's a positive income elasticity of demand. And also there are situations where there are negative income elasticity of demand. Your income increases. As a result, you reduce the demand for a certain type of products. Okay, we call it inferior goods, right? If you were consuming any inferior product earlier, now your income rises, so you think I should not use this product anymore because it's inferior, it doesn't really match with my income. So I will drop consuming that product. For example, the examples we used to take long time ago, like back then, is this Astra, margarine and butter. Okay. So margarine is usually considered to be an inferior good. But now in Sri Lanka, margarine is not an inferior good. It's really expensive, right? Usually margarine used to be inferior, butter used to be superior. So if your income rises, if you were consuming margarine, you will drop consuming margarine and move to butter. Because that's better in terms of quality, nutrients and everything, right? So with regards to margarine, there's a negative income elasticity of demand. Income elasticity of demand, yes. Is that clear? Okay. So income elasticity of demand, as I earlier said, it can be positive or negative. Positive for luxury products, negative for inferior products. Okay. You can write down the examples. Okay. Now remember these formulas. Now later on we will do questions out of these formulas. Not today because we wouldn't have time. Later on we will do questions. So you have to remember these formulas. Okay. Okay. Now we will look at cross price elasticity of demand. Okay. Have you learned about this before? Cross price elasticity of demand? Yes or no? Those who have learned it before, please raise your hand. Okay. Who else? Now you were exempted from what?
I learned this in A-levels also.
Ah, yeah. Yeah, so you all did A-levels, no? So you should know these things. I'm teaching as if you don't know anything. Right? Everybody did A-levels? Please raise your hand, those who did A-levels, commerce. Then I think we don't have to teach this subject. I mean subject, not this one. You learned all of this in detail, no? In Sinhala medium or English medium? Sinhala, that's why you don't know. You don't know the English terminology for it. When did you do A-levels? Long time ago. When did you do A-levels?
This March. This way.
This year?
Yeah, and 2021 batch. Jesus calling because.
Okay, February. Anyone who did a long time ago? When did you all do? Huh?
2003.
2003, you?
2009.
1,
2012.
12,
2011.
11.
15. 2013.
So there's different stages of doing A-levels and you might have forgotten, no? Okay. Let's think like that. Okay, so cross price elasticity of demand is a measure of the response of the quantity of one good demanded to a change in the price of another good, right? Now the thing is, sometimes there are relationships between two goods. Okay? When one product's price changes, some other product's quantity demand respond to that. That sort of relationships also can be seen. That is what you mean by cross price elasticity of demand. Cross, right? A measure of the response of the quantity of one good demanded change in the price of another good. So the price change happened in, you can see, price change happened in the product X. But who is responding to that? The demand for Y. So there's a cross price elasticity of demand relationship, right? Now, this cross price elasticity also can be either a positive value or a negative value. A positive cross price elasticity indicates that an increase in the price of X causes the demand for Y to rise. Now, in what situation can this happen? When price of X increases, quantity demand for Y increases. Two products, okay. For substitute products. For example, let's take the simplest example we take is tea and coffee, right? So when the price of tea increases, people reduce the demand for tea and they might shift for coffee instead, right? So coffee demand increases. That's why it's positive. Price of tea increases. Quantity demand for coffee also increases. Is that clear? So for substitutable products like that, you will see a positive cross price elasticity situation. Is that clear? Can you think of some other examples where there will be a positive cross price elasticity? Sorry? Rice and bread. Yes. Bread price increases. Okay, yeah, that happened. No, recently the bread prices increased. So people switched their demand. They stopped eating bread and probably they ate more rice instead of that. So demand for rice increased. That could have happened. Good. Any other example?
Flowguard and Signal toothpaste.
Sorry?
Flowguard and Signal toothpaste.
Flowguard and Signal. Yeah, two brands, substitutes. If the Flowguard toothpaste price increases, you reduce demand for Flowguard toothpaste and you go for an alternative, which is Signal. That is also a good example. So those are some examples for positive cross-price elasticity, right? Then also there can be a negative cross-price elasticity. That indicates that an increase in price of X causes a decrease in demand for Y. Price of X increase, demand for Y decreases as a result. In what situations that can happen? Complementary goods. What are these complementary goods? What are complementary goods? Sorry?
We have to buy the things.
Yeah, so you consume them together, right? Now the typical example which we take here is torch and batteries. So you consume them together. You can't light a torch without a battery, right? So you have, when you're buying a torch, you have to buy a battery as well. So that is complementary goods, right? So in terms of complementary goods, with regards to complementary goods, what happens is when the price of, let's say, assuming torch increases, or rather, let's say, when the price of battery increases, demand for battery related torch decreases. Okay, because now there are other torch which you can charge from electricity and different other sources. No, so if the batteries are too expensive, any product which uses battery, you reduce the demand for that product. Is that clear? Because those are complementary goods. So businesses should be aware of these facts when they're determining their products. Because sometimes you don't do anything, you are very innocent, you have a good price and everything. But some of your substitute product or your complementary product has either changed their price, increase or decrease. As a result, your demand is affected. Right? So you have to be mindful when you're doing a business, you have to be mindful about your substitute products, your complementary products, what are their prices, how are they changing, because that affect your product demand. Clear? That's why this cross price elasticity of demand is important. Is that clear? Any questions out of that? Did you understand, everyone who's at the back? Okay. You can take down the examples if you want. I hope you took down there. So we talked about income elasticity of demand, cost price elasticity of demand as other elasticities. And the other very important elasticity we will discuss is elasticity of supply. So it's similar to elasticity of demand, elasticity of supply. So supply comes from the supplier's point of view. I'm not sure that you were not covered about supply before in the first session. So supply curve is the upward sloping curve that was not discussed. So first of all, I'll quickly tell you, I thought you have covered demand and supply both. Supply is no, demand is downward sloping curve, no. Supply is the upward sloping curve. Why? What's the relationship between price and quantity supply? Positive. When price of a product increase, suppliers are tend to supply more. They like to supply more. So when price increase, quantity supply increases. So there is a positive relationship between price and quantity supply. So supply curve is the upward moving curve, right? Upward sloping curve. Now, elasticity of supply, similar to price elasticity of demand, we calculate price elasticity of supply as well. A measure of the responsive quantity of a good supplied to a change in price of that good, likely to be positive in output markets, right? Now, here we are specifically referring to output markets because the scenario is different in input markets. So don't worry about that for the moment. Output market means normal goods and services, the products you produce and sell, right? So, in an output market, this is how you calculate elasticity of supply. Percentage change in quantity supplied for a percentage change in price. Okay? When price change from price increase from P1 to P2, quantity will increase from Q1 to Q2. So always price elasticity of supply will have which sort of figure? What sort of a value? Positive value. PES will always be a positive value. PED will be a negative value. PES will be a positive value, right? So elastic supply, when you calculate, it will always have a plus sign. Now, now let's think about price elasticity of supply. So it also again will have values from 0 to infinity, right? But plus infinity, not negative, right? 0 to infinity, it will have values, right? So we will not discuss that in detail because that's not very important. But usually for A-level economics, you might have covered that. So again, in price elastic supply, you will have elastic supply and inelastic supply. Okay. Now, can you think in what situations will there be an elastic supply? That means for a small increase in price, suppliers produce and sell more. In what sort of situations can they have an elastic supply? Now you have to think about it from the supplier's point of view, from their mindset. Now, when a particular product's price increase, suppliers are tend to produce and supply more. They like to do that. But there are some products, just because the price increase in the market, you can't all of a sudden supply more quantity to the market, right? Because there's a production process involved, there are required raw material for your production, right? So only for products which the supplier can quickly adopt are like if you can obtain raw materials quickly and if you can produce those products quickly, then you will respond more. For a small price increment, you will produce and supply more if you can adjust your production quickly. Right? Now, for example, let's take ballpoint pens or something like that. For a ballpoint pen, you don't need much ingredients. Very limited number of ingredients are required. And it doesn't take much time to produce it also. So if the price increase in the market, you can supply more quickly. You can adjust your supply quickly. So for, in such instances, there will be an elastic supply from the producer's side. Is that clear? Now let's say you are in the business of supplying crude oil. Okay. Will you face the elastic supply curve or inelastic supply curve? If you are in the industry of crude oil, inelastic. Why?
And sometimes the price.
Yeah, because you are depending to produce crude oil, you are depending on natural oil extracts, right? Just because the price in the market increase, can you increase the raw material? You can't increase the production because raw material is limited in nature. So you just because price increase, you can't increase the production of crude oil. There's a limited number of oil refineries you can get, and it's a long process. Oil refinery is a long process. It cannot be increased overnight just because the price increases. So you, as a supplier, you don't respond to those price increments that fast. So you will face an inelastic supply, right? So likewise, even though there's a price change, producers or suppliers will have different scenarios. They might have inelastic supply or elastic supply based on the nature of the product they produce and sell. Is that clear? So you can write that down. That's not there in the slide. Next two examples, you can write them down. Okay. Now we will talk about another concept which comes in with regards to this elasticity and demand and supply, which is called consumer surplus and producer surplus. Have you come across this terminology before? Consumer surplus, producer surplus, have you come across it before? What does it mean? Now, consumer surplus means the difference between what the consumer pays and what he would have been willing to pay. Now, we know demand is a downward sloping curve. So this is the demand curve, right? So it starts here. Okay. So at quantity zero, okay, this demanders, the buyers, were willing to pay a maximum of this price. Okay, so consumers at one point were willing to pay a maximum of this price. Agree? But because of the equilibrium, demand and supply forces, at the end they had paid this price because this is a market equilibrium. So you were willing to pay a price which is high as this, but you ended up paying a lower price because of demand and supply forces. It's equilibrium. So there is a saving you do. Maximum you were willing to pay that price, and this is the price which you actually paid. So there is a there's a difference, or rather the saving of the price you pay. Okay, so that is called a consumer surplus. It's a benefit for the consumer. If you, example here, now since FIFA World Cup is going on, let's assume that if you are willing to pay $50 to buy a ticket, but later on you realize the market price for the ticket is, let's say, $40. You're able to buy the ticket at $40. You're saving $10. You are mentally prepared to pay $50. But you got to know they have set the price at 40. So from your maximum price you are willing to pay, there's a $10 reduction. Okay? So you're making a saving. So that is called consumer surplus. Is that clear? So consumer surplus, if you have to color the area, it's always below the demand curve, above the price line. That area, that triangle, is called a consumer surplus. You're making that saving for every quantity you purchase. For the quantity you purchase, you're making that saving. That is called consumer surplus. On the other hand, producer surplus. Now that is from the producer's point of view, it's based on the supply curve. Now let's assume you're a supplier, you're a producer. When you're supplying zero quantity to the market, you are initially willing to accept this price. You put that product to the market, expecting at least to charge this price. But because of demand and forces, you were able to go up in the supply curve and you were able to charge this price. Right? So you are actually in the market charging a price higher than you were earlier planning. So earlier now, if you're a supplier or a producer, you will start producing the product. So there's a cost of production. You initially think, at least I should recover the cost of production. Anything above that is my profit margin. So that is the price which they think, like, at least to cover the cost of production, this is the price. But anything you receive beyond that is adding to your profit, right? So because of the market forces of demand and supply, the market has agreed to pay this price. So you're receiving something higher than you are willing to accept. So whatever higher is your producer surplus. Clear? So if you are coloring the area of the producer surplus, that is always above the supply curve, below the price line. So that triangle would be your producer surplus. Is that clear? Example here, let's say, in the FIFA World Cup, if the organizing committee was willing to sell a ticket at minimum of $25, but due to market forces of demand and supply, you ended up selling the product at $40. That, sorry, not $10. Huh? So that difference between 25 to 40 is $15. You're making extra profit. So it's your producer surplus. So this should be 15. Huh? That is producer surplus per ticket. into the number of quantities you sell. Is that clear? So that is how you calculate consumer surplus and producer surplus. Now, after the break, let's do a calculation using producer and consumer surplus. Now, your consumer surplus and producer surplus will differ, especially consumer surplus will differ based on whether your demand curve is an elastic demand curve or an inelastic demand curve. Right? Now this example shows an inelastic demand curve. Do you agree with that? It's an inelastic demand curve, steep curve. If demand is priced inelastic, then there's a bigger gap between the price consumers are willing to pay and the price they actually pay. Because the demand curve is inelastic, can you see there's a bigger gap? The price you are willing to pay, the maximum price, and the price you ultimately paid, there's a bigger gap. So your consumer surplus will be higher if you are having an inelastic demand curve. Right? Consumer surplus would be higher. What do you think about elastic demand curve? Now this is here for you to draw. Can you quickly draw elastic demand curve and a normal supply curve and identify the consumer surplus area? Do it in your book. Draw elastic demand, draw an elastic demand and a normal supply curve, identify equilibrium, everything, and identify the consumer surplus. You can refer to this, but you have to draw elastic demand, okay? Flatter curve. Students are joining from the online platform, also draw it, okay? Draw and see how when there's elastic demand curve, how will the consumer surplus will be. Those who are done drawing can raise your hand, okay? Yeah, it's a demand. It's a supply curve. Supply curve. Demand curve. Supply curve. Earlier demand curve should be more flat. More flat. Good. So, demand is this one. Nothing. If you demand curve doing that. The demand curve should be flatter. And your supply should be very thin. So your fixed part is your concern. Did you draw? Below and show, huh? What is it? Did you draw? Curve has to be much more flatter. Let's see if you have the question. Yeah, there's a difference of plus. One difference of what? Curve more. Okay. So you should have a flatter demand curve. I don't have a whiteboard marker here to show you. I hate it. So your demand, now this is your price axis and this is your quantity axis, right? And your demand curve should be flatter. Flatter means it has to be very flat, like this. Demand curve should be flatter, not a steep one. Okay, it has to be flatter. And then you will have your supply curve, normal supply curve, right? So in that case, now this is your equilibrium where supply and demand meet. That is your equilibrium price, right? So how do you identify your consumer surplus? Maximum price the demanders were willing to pay, that is this. This is the maximum price, but the price which they ended up paying is this. So the difference between that area. So this area is called consumer surplus, right? The ones who couldn't draw, did you understand? Did you understand the flatter demand curve and the consumer surplus? So can you say that consumer surplus portion is very small compared to the consumer surplus here? When you have a steep or like an inelastic demand curve, you will have a greater consumer surplus. But when you have a elastic demand curve, you have a very smaller consumer surplus. Is that clear? Okay. So that is how the elasticity affects consumer surplus as well. So we covered like all the important concepts relating to elasticity today, right? We learned what is elasticity, the importance of elasticity, the types of elasticity, how to calculate elasticities, and also how these consumer surplus, producer surplus things differ based on the elasticity. Is that clear? Do you have any questions?
Elastic demand in the market, then we calculate the profit.
Sorry, I didn't get it.
When the demand is inelastic,
Inelastic.
that makes them more profit, like a fuel. So what is the consumer part surpluses?
No. What happens is when it's an inelastic demand curve. Now this is mostly an essential or a like some product which you really need to have. No. So for a product like that, you have very steeper demand curve. Your based on a change in price, the change in quantity is smaller. That's why you have an inelastic demand curve, right? And because this is an essential and non-substitutable product, consumers are willing to pay even the highest price and purchase it because you don't have substitutes for it. And it's essential at the same time. So you're willing to pay the maximum price. But because of market forces, demand and supply will interact and will determine a fair price. That's the price you end up paying. But as an individual consumer, somebody would have been willing even to pay the highest price for it. Why? That product is essential and there are no substitutes for it. Right? So now if you take crude oil, then we all pay like a normal price for it. But if you think of like a person like who's wealthy and who's richer, even they have the need for crude oil now. So they would have been willing to even pay the highest price. Now you might have experienced that during the oil crisis in Sri Lanka. So there was a market price for it. But there were some people who were willing to pay even higher the market price. They are the ones who brought it in the black market. Even though the price per liter goes at, let's say, 400 or 500 something, there were people who paid 1,500, 2,500, 3,500 also to buy a liter of petrol because of the necessity. So they would have been somewhere higher in this demand curve. Is that clear? That's why, again, other තමයි maximum price which any consumer is willing to pay, the ones who can. Affluent crowd එකකුත් ඉන්නවනේ, so they would pay the maximum price to get it because it's so essential. But ended up paying this price, so there's a consumer surplus. Is that clear?
So if the government will involve, so suppliers can limit the supply and make a shortage of that item, increase the price for the item.
Yeah, they can. They can. If the government did not involve, they can increase. They can limit the supply. So that means supply shift, if you have learned it. You didn't learn supply, no? So they can reduce supply means supply shift leftwards. So when the supply shift leftwards, the equilibrium price comes somewhere here. Then you anyway pay a higher price if the supply reduces. Okay? Any more questions? Is that clear to everyone? Okay, good. So let's take a break and come. Now it's 3:17. 3:30, shall we meet? Yeah. So you need about 10-15 minutes now. So we'll meet at 3:30. And then we'll continue. We'll do, there's a small question I want you all to do on consume surplus and produce surplus. Then we'll move into the next lesson. Okay. Okay, welcome back. Should we wait more for others? Or else you can start doing this question, right? So I uploaded it just now.